My gut has always been right. That's President Trump's take on his upcoming meeting in South America this week with China's leader. The president also set to sit down with Vladimir Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Good morning. It is Monday, November 26th. With us here in New York, we've got veteran columnist and MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle. Donnie Deutsch is with us, national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, John Heilman. He is the co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus. Also with us, author Lauren Leader, who's co-founder and CEO of All In Together, a nonpartisan women's civic and political organization. Also joining us in Washington, MSNBC political analyst and former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele. Joe and Mika are off today and this week. Why, you ask? They had a very busy weekend. Joe and Mika got married. It was a small, give them a round of applause. There you go. A small private wedding took place Saturday at the National Archives in Washington with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as a backdrop. Congressman Elijah Cummings officiated the traditional ceremony, which he and Joe wrote together. Joe and Mika were surrounded by all of their children, which made it very special for them, their kids, their family, and a small group of their close friends were there with them in Washington. Our congratulations, Mike. I talked to them last night. They sounded great. They're happy. They're excited, of course. And you, my friend, were at the reception.
Yes, I was.
How was it?
It was wonderful. I mean, everybody deserves happiness, and they were a very happy couple. It was a nice time. It was a wonderful reception. As you pointed out, the families on both sides, on Mika's side and Joe's side, were both there to celebrate with them, and it was a very nice evening. Yeah, unfortunately, I had to do very early morning television on Sunday in New York City, so I couldn't be there. But I'm glad, Mike, you stood in for all of us around this table.
I couldn't be there either because I wasn't invited.
Well, that's one of the through lines of your life.
Love to Joe and Mika. Really, they are really happy, and it's nice to see it. Really.
Yeah, guys, congratulations. We'll get on with the news as they would want us to do. American authorities temporarily closed the nation's busiest border crossing between San Diego and Tijuana yesterday as thousands of migrants from Central America waited to apply for asylum. The San Ysidro port, where more than 100,000 people cross every day, was then reopened around 6 o'clock yesterday evening. The shutdown came amid a day of strife in which U.S. Customs and Border Protection said in a statement it used tear gas and pepper spray after several migrants threw rocks at border agents, striking them. No injuries, though, were reported. This after a reporter for the Associated Press reported witnessing U.S. border agents fire tear gas on hundreds of migrants protesting near the border. After some of them attempted to get through the fencing and wire separating the two countries, frustration boiling over with the border agent processing only about 100 asylum petitions a day as more than 5,000 migrants wait in and around a cramped sports complex in Tijuana after traveling through Mexico in a caravan. President Trump says he's given active duty troops at the border the okay to use lethal force against migrants, quote, if they have to.
They said, these are not like normal, innocent people. These are people, you talk to them and they start a fist fight. I don't want that in this country. Okay?
Mr. President, what about the idea that the military may use lethal force against these migrants?
If they have to, they're going to use lethal force. I've given the okay. Yeah, if they have to. I hope they don't have to.
According to Politico, it was a fiery West Wing meeting that led to the president granting troops the right to use lethal force at the border. 3 people briefed on the exchange, telling Politico a meeting last Monday devolved into a melee pitting Chief of Staff John Kelly and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen against other attendees who have supported the president's hawkish immigration agenda. Kelly and Nielsen argued against signing the declaration for lethal force, which granted the military broad authority at the border, telling the president the move was beyond his constitutional powers. They were vocally opposed by senior policy advisor Stephen Miller, as well as Chris Crane, the president of the National Immigration and Customs Enforcement Council, and Brandon Judd, the president of the Border Patrol Union. According to Politico, Kelly and Nielsen eventually came around to the president's position, and the bitter dispute ended Tuesday evening when Kelly, on President Trump's orders, signed a cabinet declaration granting the military the disputed authority. John Howman, let's start with you on this part of the conversation. Just what happened inside the West Wing. We know when we read these stories, the heroes are usually the people who talk to the publication about it. Do you believe John Kelly and Kirstjen Nielsen stood up to the president when he said, I want to use lethal force against migrants waiting at the border or trying to cross at the border?
I don't have any reason to disbelieve it on the basis of past reporting. It seems like consistent with where their positions have been on this topic, and I think there's obviously there are questions, there are operational questions, and it's often the case in situations like this where you find someone who has an affiliation with the military, where, like John Kelly does, who understands what happens when that kind of authority is granted. Often it gets used in the heat of a moment, and I think Kelly, sometimes his political instincts are not that great, but in this instance, I think both from the standpoint of what a traditional kind of military perspective would be on this, and in this case, I think the right political perspective in the sense that if there is going to be lethal force used at the border, it could be a disaster politically for the administration if that plays out. How much they stood up to him? One has no reason to. I can't speculate. Don't know the answer to that question. But it doesn't say, as I say, it doesn't seem inconsistent with where they seem to have been on these debates in the past.
Lauren, however they, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it's really important because there are a lot of dangerous people with they used to start fist fights. This is really important to look at the lethal force that our armed forces are going to have to use against this mom and her two little kids. I think it's really important that Trump initiated the lethal force against these kids.
So, Lauren, you have a boiling, ugly situation at the border where the president has granted the authority to use lethal force. The Border Patrol yesterday showed willingness to use tear gas against people who were throwing rocks, allegedly, and trying to come over the border. Where do we go from here in this situation? What if many of these migrants cross the border and there is a military confrontation?
Yeah, well, first of all, look, it's illegal and it's immoral above all else. It's absolutely profoundly immoral. And it's illegal for a reason. We have a legal structure that the Congress passed, which allows people to apply for asylum through the Customs and Enforcement wherever and however they enter the country. And the president doesn't care about that. And to your point about whether or not they stood up, they could have resigned. And actually, Kirstjen Nielsen could have resigned when the president asked her to ask ICE to rip children out of the arms of their parents in the last round of appalling so-called border security. I mean, the reality is at the end of the day, the president is surrounded with people who are willing to do basically anything, whether or not it's illegal, let these immoral acts go all the way to the courts. And then even in some cases, when they go to the courts, the president continues to question them. So, my only hope is that the military is going to have cooler heads. And we have heard some from military leaders already saying that absolutely they're not firing on women and children who are unarmed at the border. There's also questions whether or not anyone actually threw rocks yesterday. NPR was reporting that actually it was relatively peaceful, except that obviously they were trying to break through and get through because the waits are impossible. It's a nightmare situation. There's no services or support for them on the Tijuana side. It's a disaster, but we could have been sending, we could have sent agents to Mexico months ago to prepare the asylum claims long in advance, and we didn't do that.
Michael Steele, this also comes against the backdrop of the president declaring over the weekend, without Mexico signing on to it, that there'd be a new policy where asylum seekers would have to wait on the Mexican side of the border, to effectively wait in places like Tijuana or the Rio Grande, to wait for their hearing to see whether they were granted asylum, which in many cases takes years.
Yeah, which is, again, puts a lot of pressure on that borderline. So you have a situation where folks are pressing up against the so-called wall on the one side. The U.S. is slow rolling on the other side, to the point just made. There aren't the personnel in place. The military that's been sent there is not really prepared to deal with this human influx. They're used to engaging with combatants, not moms with children. And so the Mexican government and the U.S. government need to get into a space where they have some level of arrangement or agreement as to how this process is going to unfold, so that this does not boil up into something bigger. My concern is that the president would not be that put off if this thing did get much more heated, and blew up, because it would then make his point, see, these are bad people, and we have to control and contain the border. But yeah, if you create a pressure cooker, at some point, what's in that pot will blow up if it's not maintained properly, and that is one of the drivers, I think, right now more than anything else. Congress needs to step up and step in here to redirect the hands of the president.
You know, we ought not to be surprised by any of this. This is just another long line of chaos and incompetence brought to you by the Trump administration. We do not have an ambassador to Mexico.
Right.
We have a charge d'affaires in Mexico City. The ambassador quit earlier this summer. We have 3 people I know, General Mattis, General Kelly, and General Dunford, who clearly remember Kent State in the spring of 1970, when the National Guard in Ohio had live ammunition. The United States Army, it would be a horrendous misuse of the United States military to have them firing on any civilian at any border. And these people on the border, Donnie just referenced it, the President of the United States, we just heard him say that these people, when you attempt to have a conversation with them, they start a fist fight. I mean, that is beyond absurd. This is the President of the United States speaking. This is the President of the United States encouraging an action that is so opposed to everything that this country stands for. But we ought not to be shocked, because it happens nearly every day.
Donnie, you know Donald Trump. The president thinks this looks tough. He thinks if you talk about having guys at the border with guns, it's going to deter people from coming here. It was the same argument they used that Jeff Sessions also used for the family separation policy. It will deter people from coming here. This is what getting tough on immigration looks like to President Trump.
Yeah, I love Mr. Tough Guy, who's tough on women and children, but when it comes to the Crown Prince, or when it comes to Vladimir Putin, the really tough people of the world,
he won't visit the troops because he's afraid of being hurt.
He backs down like the wussy that he is. You know, beyond the fact, the amorality of it and the illegality of it, the political stupidness of it also. We just came off an election.
I'm not so sure about that.
Well, he doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on the caravan. And
it works for him, though.
Well, I don't know. Last I looked, we picked up close to 40 seats, and we won 9% in the popular vote in the congressional election. It works with that core 38, 39%.
Yeah.
It does not work with the other 7 or 8% that he needs to win elections. People care about their health care. People care about their jobs. Other than that small core, this does not work, or at least it was proven in the last laboratory.
But do you think that it works in the sense that the Democrats have a continued failure to deal vocally, verbally, strongly with immigration?
I think the president perceives it working. And I think in some sense, what matters is, I agree with you, Donnie, you're not going to, the midterm elections were a vivid demonstration of exactly how this issue works for the president. It works in the sense that it reinforces his base. It drives turnout in certain places, especially big white rural states. It doesn't help him at all in the broader swath of the country that he needs to win if he's going to get reelected as president. None of that matters, though, because all that matters is what he thinks. And I don't mean all that matters in the world, but I mean in this context. Yeah. And I think what he's trying to do, more likely, is to actually provoke a confrontation. Yeah. Because you saw, for all of us, you point to that picture right there on the front of the New York Post and say, hey, these people are not a threat. What a lot of people saw on television last night was the breach in the breach in the fence and people pouring through it. I'm not endorsing this. I'm just telling you what Donald Trump is saying. What Donald Trump is saying is that image and a lethal confrontation, he thinks that image will work for him politically. So he's happy to have a situation that's incendiary, that might lead to the juxtaposition of that image with a United States military, one of the troops having to shoot someone if he can provoke one violent confrontation in which someone who is a migrant looks as though they're engaging in violence against our troops, and that troop, he thinks that works for him. And again, I don't think it does work for him, but it doesn't matter what I think. In terms of the policy that he's going to pursue and what the manipulative, cynical political uses that it will be put towards, and potentially deadly uses it will be put towards, all that matters is what's going on in Donald Trump's head. He does not think he suffered a giant repudiation last week, and he thinks that this issue is going to continue to work for him 4 years from now.
Yeah.
Lauren, you mentioned John Kelly, mentioned Kirstjen Nielsen. You have to wonder where James Mattis, again, is in this. The defense secretary, the decorated general. What does he think about soldiers with live ammunition being given lethal force authority at the border?
Well, my understanding is he thinks it's absolutely unacceptable and it's not going to happen. I mean, these are these moments, right, where we're seeing this just massive stress test on our democracy and a massive stress test on virtually every check and balance that we have. And, the military is one of them. We are not a military dictatorship. And the military does have a certain level of independence. He is the commander-in-chief. But the military also does have the authority to decide for themselves where there are moral lines that they will or won't cross. And I hope he will stand up and absolutely refuse to enforce these illegal actions. And I think it would be devastating, not just obviously for all the reasons you've described and the human rights abuse. It would be devastating for the U.S. military, who I guarantee you, as an all-volunteer force, under enormous stress. We have folks not getting paid and getting evicted from their homes because they can't get paid on the GI Bill. And then we're going to ask them to go shoot unarmed women and children at the border. I mean, it's a catastrophe on every level. I would be shocked if Mattis allowed this to happen.